and Derrell
Hello.
Acon of the Long Beach Opera. Guys, thank you very much for being here. We'll be talking with them about a half hour about an exhausting last couple of months for the opera. We'll get into that in a second. If you have any comments, any questions, please. We'd love when you participate. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about in the opera. Even before we came on, we were talking about Jennifer doing some borderline illegal stuff. We don't want to get into that. And also, where this is coming from, there may be a gas leak. And at any moment, we could jump out of here. So it's going to be very dramatic. But what's more dramatic than opera? Am I right? This is what we're talking about. Guys, thanks for being here. I just want to go over very quickly what it's been like the past couple months. You started a season. Like a lot of people, you started to cancel performances. Then you canceled the season. Then you got the news that the Central Park Five, which Derrell was in, had won the Pulitzer. You had already announced a new season. You then announced these community conversations you're having. It's been nuts, all the stuff that's been going on. Jen, how are you kind of keeping things level-headed and moving ahead with so much going on and everything being so new?
Yeah, it's interesting because, the first month was like crisis management of just figuring out how do we manage. And the good thing is that everybody was in the same boat. I mean, not the good thing, obviously, but the helpful thing for those of us leading is that we were all talking to each other, trying to figure it out. The arts organizations in Long Beach have a really, close bond. So we were talking about it. But once we kind of realized, all right, this season has to be canceled, what are we going to do next? Then it was to projects and to figuring out how we're going to create art in the interim. I mean, I read something somewhere that said, well, arts organizations are just going to have to hibernate. There's nothing they can do. And we were like, no way, not us. We're not doing that. We're going to figure out a way to do lots of stuff. So, it's in that way, it's been very invigorating. I think had we not been continually putting out content and thinking of new things and thinking of next season, I think it would have been harder. But I think that allowed us to keep our creative juices flowing. And then the Pulitzer thing was just an enormous, amazing, exciting surprise that we didn't know was coming to add to the pot. So it's been crazy, but it's been good to be working and doing things.
When I was writing about the new season you announced last week, I kind of mentioned there that if there was any organization that is up for a time like this, that is so much upheaval and so different, it's Long Beach Opera, which even at the best of times is almost challenging itself every year to do something just different and crazy and trying the best they can to bring in something that kind of mixes things up. So I know this is obviously a crazy time, but it actually works within the kind of overall philosophy of Long Beach Opera, right?
Yeah, it does. I mean, this is a new twist and a turn to take, but I think we are uniquely able to handle it because we have been trying to reframe opera anyway. This is another reframing. How are we going to do it in this new environment? So, we feel responsibility to continue to create art, knowing that we already have been doing it in unusual circumstances.
Derrell, you were in Central Park 5 last year when you talk about reframing what an opera is. And you and I were talking before we went on about today, the biggest news is about an incident that happened in Central Park where a African-American man was being falsely accused of about to attack someone. And the moment I saw that, I was like, oh man, I mean, it seems like nothing has changed. I'm curious, when you heard about that, maybe saw the video itself, what kind of thoughts went through your head having gone through the process of being in the opera itself?
Steve, sadly, not a lot of new thoughts went through my head. As one of the words you used at the beginning of this chat was exhausting. That's the main thing I feel about this. And then there's another video out right now about a cop pressing down someone's head against the concrete. All of it is just so exhausting. But the Central Park video in particular, I mean, I think it just goes to show you that the Central Park jogger case is still relevant. That's one of the reasons LBO chose to do Central Park 5 last year, even though the case has been over for many years now, is because it's still relevant, this sense of entitlement to space and to convenience at all times is something that is just so prevalent in our culture, and it leads to systemic racism. And that's what you see in that video. And the thing the one surprising thing I will say is that, like, as video recordings are becoming more ubiquitous, people are just shameless. I mean, she knew the guy was recording her, and she just still blatantly lies about being attacked, even knowing that it's going to be revealed that she was lying in the first place. But in that moment, she was so attached to the power she had, being a white woman versus a black man, and even giving the indicator, "I'm going to tell the police that an African American man." The language is very, very weighted. So, I mean, I think it's just something we should understand is still relevant and still in our culture.
Derrell, opera is known for tackling big subjects, huge subjects, right? And Central Park certainly fits in that. But because it is so relevant in current events, what was it like to go through that process of rehearsing that and going through that and having the President of the United States actually be a character in that? We have a beautiful shot that I love to run. In fact, I ran it on our social media of you and an actress. It almost looks like the Pieta, her comforting you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and that doesn't look like that's something that you're acting. That seems deeply felt. What was the process of bringing Central Park 5 to the stage like for you?
I mean, you have it exactly right. It was deeply, deeply emotional, and I know exactly the shot you're talking about. And in that moment, that's my mother. The character is playing my mother coming, and I remember the first several times we did a rehearsal, I would just start crying uncontrollably to the point where she actually had to actually hold me and comfort me, just because the thought of my mom being involved with anything like that. I feel like, as is the case with so many young Black men, my number one goal in life is to just make my mom proud. And so, I don't want to bring any inconvenience to her life. And so imagining that from an acting point of view was just very deeply emotional. And I will tell you, another emotional part was one of the nights of Central Park 5, we were able to bring in a class of Jordan High School boys, young Black men in the audience in their Jordan High School t-shirts. And Jenny can tell you, because in that moment, she was my mom, and backstage, I was crying uncontrollably. And she had to literally sit with me and comfort me, because some of these emotions, as you said, opera deals with these big subjects, but when they're so personal and so relevant and raw to you and your own personal experience, it can take you to a place that is really difficult to be in. So that was one thing it brought up for me.
Jen, I saw you that day. I was there at opening night at the Grand at the Warner Grand in San Pedro, and that audience was electric.
Yeah.
Derrell, you were into the performance. Jen, what was it like for you to be outside looking in, seeing? I'm sure you were able to see the reaction. What was that evening like for you?
I mean, the whole experience of doing the piece was very emotional, inspirational. I mean, the whole time I felt like heightened emotion. It started with the rehearsal period, and then our singers getting to meet the actual guys who were the Central Park 5, which I think is probably one of the most, I don't want to say exciting moments, but somehow fulfilling moments to me, to be able to bring together these artists with the people that they're playing and to tell this important story. And then being in the audience and seeing the audience reaction. And you're right, it was electric, and they jumped to their feet, and just the diversity of the audience and their willingness to take the journey and to be there. I mean, all of it was, it's very hard to describe, but it's a very fulfilling, gratifying experience to know that you had a part in making this happen.
And now you just announced, I believe, I wrote this, I hope I'm right, that you're the first major local arts organization to announce a completely new season, full season. I'm just curious what you're excited about. It is a daring season, which is redundant with Long Beach Opera, but it's also daring not just in thematically what you're doing, but geographically. You're all over the place. You're at the Aquarium, or you're in Los Angeles. You're at the Beverly O'Neill. Was that on purpose, or is that the only places you could get?
We tend to pick locations based on how they fit the piece because we are not tied to a certain location and because we have sort of developed a reputation for site specific things. It often kind of comes along together. The project would be really great in this particular place. And that was the case. The aquarium opera was something from last year, but it came about as, we wanted to think of something to do with the aquarium with that new theater. So that's how that title came about. The thing that we're doing at the Wallace in Beverly Hills is very dance heavy, and that's a very good dance theater. And it's another organization that sort of likes to take risks with their programming. So it was great to collaborate with them. But it really is, it depends on the piece. So it's often the case with us that we're all over the place.
Now, rumors are already rampant that the piece at the aquarium is called The Lighthouse. It's based on a real event, which sounds bizarre, which was there were 3 lighthouse keepers back, I can't remember, is it the 19th century or something like that? And they were isolated on this island, and then they went to get them and they were all gone. They were just not there. And so this opera deals with that, but the rumors I keep hearing is that in the Honda Theater, which is this spectacular theater at the aquarium, that are we going to feel sea breeze in our face? And
that theater is like a 4D theater. It's like those theaters that are in the theme parks that have mist and wind and air, and we intend to use the full capabilities of the theater.
That's gonna be awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I love it. Later we can go on a roller coaster. It's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be great.
You can watch opera on a roller coaster. That's what's next.
Right.
Why not?
I'm curious, are you in any of the upcoming, I know you're going to be part of that, well, you're actually going to lead the community conversations. Are you in any of the upcoming productions?
It's a secret.
We're discussing it right now. We haven't cast all the singers yet, so he's not allowed to reveal, but I can say it's likely.
How's it been for you, Derrell? I want to talk about this because Long Beach Opera has actually reached out to really help their singers. What's it been like for you as a singer getting through this period when basically there's really no performances to be had? How have you been getting by?
It began as a very dramatic and sad and shocking experience because I've had over 20, close to 30 performances canceled actually. So this is over $10,000 worth of income that is just vanished. And some of those companies have chosen to pay out the contracts or pay portion of the fees. Other contracts have just gone away altogether. But I would say after the first maybe 2 weeks of shock, just being who I am and always trying to attach myself to optimism, I started to use this period for productive things. And I felt very productive over the last several weeks. And it actually has been quite relaxing. I don't feel like I've been able to actually do my own thing on my own schedule for probably a decade, so in some ways it's refreshing. And of course, I'm still doing projects with Long Beach Opera. So, it's not like my entire life is turned upside down, as is the case with so many of my colleagues. And it sucks not to be singing, as which is my passion, but I feel like there are other passions of mine that I'm able to spend a little bit more focus on during this period. So it's a win-win in some ways.
If you don't know, Jennifer is herself an opera singer. So I know, Jen, this is the fate of your singers is very important to you. What has the opera been doing to kind of throw a bit of a lifeline to the singers right now when, like with Derrell, there just really isn't much going on?
Well, we made the decision to go ahead and pay our singers who were scheduled to perform. And we sort of we guaranteed we would pay them 50%, but we said we would try to pay them 100% depending on the ticket returns. And so we're going to announce pretty soon to the public that we're going to be able to pay them 100%. And for the singers, that is obviously as a singer, I'm very sensitive to what this must be like. And I went through the economic downturn in 2008 when there was companies that were collapsing. And I know what it's like to be a singer and to have work evaporate, but none of us have ever seen anything like this. I mean, they have no work for maybe a year, some of them, because some things are getting canceled until 2021. And they have families to feed, and there's no safety net in our country for, for people who are freelancers. So I was very, very determined that I wanted to make sure that at least for our singers that we could compensate them. And I'm glad that we did that. And then additionally, we kind of came up with this plan to create these artist afternoon performances as a way to keep them working and creating and performing on a daily basis. I mean, not all of them, but there's 5 of them that we're able to keep employed in this way to not only bring people some art and some joy, but to keep them creating. And a lot of them said they were just like Derrell said in the beginning, like depressed and feeling a real lack of creativity, and having an outlet to do that is outside of you, that's imposed from the outside, sort of spurred their creativity. And so that's been really very gratifying.
Well, whenever you talk with anyone in music, whether it's a musician or a singer, they'll always make the distinction between playing and performing, that they're 2 totally different things. So you can play all you want at your house, but it's when you get in front of an audience that the thing gets popped up a notch. What's it like for you? You can still sing, but not being able to be in front of a live audience to feel that energy. How is that different for you?
I mean, there are no words to describe the difference. It's a completely different experience. When you're rehearsing, you're usually trying to improve your technique, involve yourself more intimately with the language, work on interpretation, these sorts of things. Whereas when you're in front of an audience, you're telling a story and you're interacting, and it's for them. It's no longer about you. It's no longer about you trying to become a better artist or anything like that. It's only about telling the story to the audience. And so to be rehearsing on these different elements that come with the craft without any specific date on which you're going to actually express all of your rehearsal to an audience, it can feel deflating, really. And I think some of us, I know me, for example, I'm not singing every day like I normally would if I had contracts coming up, but I will sing at least twice a week just to remind myself why I love it. Or I watch YouTube videos of other people singing, or something like that. I think there's the love of performing, but there's also, with most opera singers, just the love of opera and the love of its power. And so some of that you can still experience even without being able to perform for an audience.
I hear you. I sing every day and get nowhere. And you can come on, give me some. Hey, one of the things you're going to be doing, you did them last year. Last year's theme was social justice, and you did these community conversations that were amazing. Normally, when like a symphony or an opera does community conversations, it's usually about, Puccini's home life or stuff like that, but these are actual real stuff, real issues that are going on right now. For instance, one of them has to do with race, and one which I'm fascinated by, I believe it's mid or late June, Derrell, correct me on this, is about opera and body image, which yes. I think is amazing. How'd you guys come up with the subjects? And given the world we're in right now, how will these be played out? You're probably not going to be able to have everybody there together, I'm guessing. So how will these play out?
Well, we're going to have them on Zoom, similar to this. We'll have them on Zoom, and then we'll stream them on our Facebook Live page. So anyone watching, please join us for these. They're June 14th. They're all on Sunday, June 14th, June 21st, and June 28th. And so first we have one around equity and diversity in the arts, which is a panel we did last year as well. And we've added a round table on contemporary blackface in opera, because that's a subject that is so polarizing in our field, and we never really have the experience or the opportunity to discuss it as a community. But now that we're all stuck in our homes, it gives us that opportunity. And then on the 21st, we have a conversation around social media, to IG or not to IG. And then finally on the 28th, the conversation you mentioned, Till the Fat Lady Sings, around opera and body image. There are many reviews that have been written mostly about women and their size relative to the characters they're portraying, but also with men. We have this thing called bear hunks, where people are judged based on how well they're able to maintain their physique, whereas other people feel left out from those circles. And so that's a conversation we felt was very important to discuss. And I learned actually after the fact that Jenny has a history of really taking it to the core with this latter subject. She showed me a video, an interview that she did on, I think it was BBC. I don't remember the reporter's name, Jenny.
Yeah,
Yeah, which is awesome.
I just showed him this video that I did. I think it was probably 5 years ago now. There was an episode where this young woman played a role in an opera, a very normal sized woman, but she got all these really nasty reviews about her body size, and it ended up making like international news because it was sort of so awful. And I was seen as like an opera expert at the time. I was still singing, but I was writing for Huffington Post. So I did this interview with BBC News with this interviewer who was like kind of really nasty about it and about this woman's weight. And I was on like delay video chat, but you see me going a couple times because he was like really criticizing this amazing singer who's of completely normal size, and I'm like, look, opera singers can't always look like models. I mean, we're doing this physical thing. We're not going to be like a teacup. So anyway, that was an interesting experience. But that's one of the things that this whole conversation is based on, because it's been going on for a long time. There's this affiliation with opera as being, the fat lady, which is one, stereotype of opera. But then there's this other side about how opera is an athletic sport and it requires a certain body ability and does not necessarily require people who are super rail thin. So, talking about how to incorporate all those individuals into the art form that we do and that we train so long for, it's a passionate subject.
And again, going back to just the idea of these conversations, again, most arts organizations have conversations based on the music, and this is what life was like at Mozart's time and this kind of stuff. And maybe a conductor will actually explain the music to you. This is certainly tangential to the music itself. Why did you want to do this? And I'm just curious, have you ever gotten any pushback from any people, maybe subscribers, who say like, hey man, I don't want to have to think about the outside world. I just want to hear about opera.
Well,
I'll let Derrell answer that. We've gotten very little pushback, but talk about how these came about, Derrell, and why they are.
Yeah, I mean, last year it made sense with the season, as you said, around justice, and these were leading up to Central Park 5. But LBO, we believe that these conversations we have about operas, they need to not only happen in the theater, but they need to be more inclusive of other topics in our world. One thing that I think, I'm an opera scholar, someone who specialized in 19th century opera. And one thing that I think we're missing today in opera is the relevance of what's going on around us. And so I think one thing that LBO does so well is that even if we don't, say, for example, have an opera that's specifically talking about police brutality or specifically talking about, body image or anything like that, we still feel like it is part of our responsibility as a community arts organization to discuss these topics that are all relevant, not only to opera as a field, but to society at large. And I think these community conversations give us the opportunity to do that. And since we're able to incorporate opera and singing and big opera names and opera scholars, it's all within the world of opera, but in typical LBO fashion, it's just a different spin on how we present that world to the outside public.
It's great stuff. Jen, we've got about 2 minutes. I just want to ask you, I emailed you when I was writing the previous story saying, I hate to ask this, but your season starts literally in the middle of flu season, okay? Which is, we all hope that it can just go on. You mentioned, though, that you guys are already thinking of contingency plans. Is that right?
I mean, every arts organization is currently thinking of plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D. We just are lucky because we've kind of been doing that all along. Like doing an opera in a cemetery is most people's plan D, but that's what we were planning already for this season. So it's like, we sort of, yes, we are looking at all the possibilities, all of the locations. We're lucky we're in Southern California because it's warm and, things could be outdoors. I mean, there's a lot of options for us, particularly because we are so accustomed to the weird logistics of site-specific things. So this is kind of right up our alley to figure out the logistics of how to make this work safely.
I just can't imagine. What's a normal day for you like? days like I mean, and I normals in quotes, of course. What's a day like for you?
Well, I mean, when we were gearing up to do the opera at the cemetery, there were definitely a lot of like jokes amongst us about like, what did you do today? Oh, I had to go to the cemetery, and like, I mean, there are definitely weird days, where I think this is only happening for me because I work at LBO. Right. Especially with the site-specific things. And we should mention that our interim artistic advisor next season, Yuval Sharon, who runs his own company in LA, the industry, also specializes in doing crazy, crazy things, operas with people riding in cars and on rooftops and like all over the place. Right. So between the two of us, there's a lot of crazy discussions that happen, but it's like when something like this happens, okay, let's go. What's next? Let's figure it out.
Well, that's terrific. Hey, I want to thank both of you for being here. It was wonderful. As I told you, that went so quickly. We were talking about, Jen said, how long is that? It's a half hour. And again, we could have talked about Jen's nefarious activities, but that would have taken a whole different spin.
That'll be another Facebook Live.
That'll be its own. Sure.
You can have me back for that one.
Anyways, guys, thank you very much. Good luck with everything. We look forward to those conversations coming up, and of course, next season. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you. We'll have another conversation, actually chat tomorrow at 1 p.m. Be sure and tune in and join along. We always love talking to you. Again, bye-bye.
Bye.